Unlike other technologies which traditionally have been based either on some form of electronic jamming or other technologies which are kinetic, which are physical, which are based on shooting, we're actually based on a completely different technology where we detect and basically take over the rogue drone and land it surgically and gently and safely in a predefined controlled area.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 418. How do we take control of truly dangerous drone situations? For that question, we head to Israel to speak with Jeffery Starr, Chief Marketing Officer at D-Fend Solutions. D-Fend Solutions is the leading global provider of cyber-takeover counter-drone solutions. By focusing on the acute drone threat, their technology enables organizations around the world to maintain full control, safety, and continuity during rogue drone incidents. The company's core offering, called EnforceAir, automatically executes radio frequency cyber takeovers of rogue drones for safe landings and safe outcomes. Jeffery brings a track record of generating revenue and building market leadership through visionary business strategies. Prior to joining D-Fend Solutions, Jeffery served as CMO and had executive roles at AlgoSec, Cellebrite, Verisk 3E, Magic Software Enterprises, and Amdocs. He also served as general partner at Mission Ventures VC Fund and as an analyst at Booz Allen. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Jeffery talks about D-Fend Solutions and the way the company is helping organizations throughout the world create safer skies by controlling dangerous drone situations. But before we hear from Jeffery, I want to stress that your support is the heartbeat of my podcast. Every episode is crafted with you in mind, and your generous donations ensure I can keep delivering the content you love. Whether it's the price of a coffee or a more substantial contribution, every bit helps to defray the cost of production. Donate today and be a vital part of the podcast's continued journey to greatness. And for a limited time, donate $100 or more and receive an official Drone Radio Show coffee mug. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And if you can, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave a nice review and rating on iTunes. It really helps improve the podcast ranking among the many thousands of active podcasts today. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's find out how controlling the drone is the most effective way to control the threat with Jeffery Starr of D-Fend Solutions. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Jeffery to introduce himself.
Hi, this is Jeffery Starr, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of D-Fend Solutions. And it's great to be back on your show, Randy.
Thanks, Jeffery. It's a pleasure to have you back. For our listeners who might not be familiar, could you tell us about D-Fend Solutions and explain what the company does?
D-Fend Solutions is a counter-UAS or counter-drone technology company. But the interesting thing to emphasize is that even though we're a counter-drone or counter-UAS company, our vision is very much around a positive pro-drone view of the world. Our vision is to enable the emerging drone-powered society and enable this drone-powered society to flourish and support safe and secure drone adoption with very innovative, very precise, very surgical solutions that actually defend against the smaller number of rogue drone threats. So we want to overcome these rogue drone threats by leading with the most advanced technology and solutions to overcome these drone threats, especially in very sensitive environments and in a controlled manner that enables continuity, that enables the good drones, the positive drones, the beneficial drones to continue to fulfill the mission. So basically, we're a provider of a new category of technology for counter-drone. We call it RF cyber-takeover for the most sensitive and challenging environments. And as you can sort of figure out by the way it's described, unlike other technologies which traditionally have been based either on some form of electronic jamming, which disrupts the communication between a remote control and a drone, but also has the potential to disrupt other communications and operations and security in the area, and is only temporary and could allow rogue drone pilot to regain control, or other technologies which are kinetic, which are physical, which are based on shooting down a rogue drone through any kind of projectile, whether it be bullets, artillery, magnetic, killing drone, lasers, you name it, all kinds of different ways. We're actually based on a completely different technology where we detect and basically take over the rogue drone and land it surgically and gently and safely in a predefined controlled area. And we enable public safety and law enforcement and military and so forth to counter the rogue drone threat, but in a way that kind of enables continuity, that's not disruptive, if you will, that reduces the chance for collateral damage or operational disruption. And we have hundreds of deployments around the world. We're in close to 30 countries. We're used by really the top tier defense, homeland security, law enforcement sort of applications. We've been entrusted to protect very large, complex global events that have tens of thousands of attendees. So that's kind of our vision, a very pro-drone, counter-drone view of the world, if you will.
Jeffrey, how old is the company?
We're approaching, about 7 years now. And during that period, we've grown enormously, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of our presence around the world. And, our growth both in geographically, but also in terms of all the different types of drone threats that we cover and the different types of sectors where we protect, everything from, as I mentioned, events, airports, but also, military, law enforcement, prisons, critical infrastructure. So our growth, commensurate with the growth in drones, the positive growth in drones, there's also been a proliferation of incidents and threats and dangers. And that's sort of been a major stimulant for our growth as well.
Given the variety of incidences you've mentioned, could you share more about the nature and the scale of drone threats currently? How significant is this issue based on recent observations?
On our website, we have something called the Drone Attack and Incident Tracker, where we compile and collect from all different public domain sources around the world incidents. And you can count them, you can sort them. They're arranged by location, by sector, by type of incident, by date. And not just in the past year, even just in the past 2 months or so, even just in the past month, a month and a half since the beginning of the year, I can just give some examples, again, across sectors. So, right off the bat, at the beginning of the year on January 2nd, you had an Iberia flight to Puerto Rico, for example, that was diverted and had to go actually land in the Dominican Republic because of drone intrusions at the airport in Puerto Rico. And this caused a chain effect, if you will, of disruptions of flights all across the Caribbean on that date. You can imagine the delays and the diversions and the departures and the angry customers and everything like that. Another example that many of the listeners may have noticed if they're football fans is on January 28th, there was an unauthorized drone over M&T Bank Stadium, disrupting the Kansas City-Baltimore AFC Championship game, which caused a delay in game, if you will, not in the penalty sense. And then throughout this year, an area that we've seen massive growth in the number of incidents is prisons. And again, just even this year, 2024, and I mean, I could also talk about 2023, but just in 2024, we've seen drone incidents of attempted smuggling of contraband, drugs, other things into prisons in South Carolina, in a number of different federal prisons in West Virginia, and more. And you can find, I think there's been like at least about 6 or 7 incidents in prisons just this year. And so those are just a few that happened this year already. And if we look at last year, again, many different sectors. I mean, airports were plagued with lots of incidents. Dublin Airport, in particular in Ireland, had a number like 6 or 7 drone sightings, which caused flight suspensions, all in a short period of time. There were, again, incidents around Gatwick Airport. There are just many, many more. There have been incidents last year at Heathrow Airport, at Gatwick Airport, as I mentioned, and in the U.S. at Palm Beach Airport, in the Westfield Barnes Regional Airport, at Pittsburgh Airport. Many, many, and you can, the FAA and others track this as well, and you can find this in the public domain. You can find it at our tracker. But, these kind of incidents are just growing, and it's almost not a few days goes by without some sort of major incident like this occurring.
Separating out the prison incursions, are the bulk of the incidents caused by accidental flying or by someone with malicious intent?
That's a great question. No, we're seeing a range of it. Now, typically, most of these incidents that, we've described near airports and others, many of them are, more what we would call the careless or the clueless, and you have the 4 C's there, rather than the criminal or the combatant. But, even careless kid playing with his drone where they shouldn't in a sensitive environment like an airport could potentially cause a collision or a major incident. So a lot of the day-to-day incidents are, careless, clueless, maybe slightly malicious intent type of users. But then, of course, security officials have to worry more about the criminal or the terroristic or the combatant or the state actor as the potentially bigger and even more catastrophic type of motivation. We also sell to military, and there what's happening in battlefields, both in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Israel-Hamas conflict, is this proliferation of commercial off-the-shelf drones being weaponized very cheaply. And so militaries also need this type of counter-drone technology in order to, deal with this type of threat, the threat from commercial drones being weaponized. And they're also looking for often surgical solutions that don't disrupt communications that could, for example, allow them to capture the drone if they wanted to capture the intelligence associated with it. So it is a mix of motives. Again, what some people have called the 4 C's, the clueless and the careless, but also the criminal and the combatant.
What drones do you focus on?
We focus on the most popular manufactured commercial off-the-shelf drones. We focus especially on those that can be dangerous, those that can carry a heavy payload, those that can travel long distances, that can be easily converted into this kind of malicious use. But I should emphasize, we also counter what some people call DIY, do-it-yourself drones, which are constructed, easily assembled by off-the-shelf components that people, can buy on a hardware store. So we're focused on what the DoD or NATO and others call the group 1 and 2, the small commercial off-the-shelf drones that can wreak havoc. And the thing I want to emphasize is that, we're often asked, do you counter this drone or that drone, being asked about the latest drones to market. And we're constantly, that's our expertise, is we have the technology, the RF cyber expertise to constantly, in this never-ending sort of cat and mouse leapfrog game, to counter new drones as they come into market. But many of the times, the attacks also come from very old drones, legacy drones. There's very old drones that we've seen used to devastating effect. So it's important not only to be able to counter the latest and greatest drones, but to be able to counter legacy older drones that still have enormous capabilities to cause damage. So that coverage is very important across the spectrum.
For organizations interested in adopting your technology, what's involved in the setup process? Can you walk us through the typical requirements for implementing the system?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, and I should emphasize that, this is, of course, a regulated business as well. So it's you have to be authorized to use this kind of technology. And we'll talk about we can talk later about the regulations and so forth. But in general, our primary users are, in the defense, law enforcement, and homeland security, type of environments and applications. And with our system, Now you buy the hardware, and the hardware itself has many different deployments or configurations, depending on the use case. So it might be a permanent stationary sort of fixture, like you would have at critical infrastructure, you would have at like maybe a prison. And that kind of provides a permanent dome, omnidirectional dome of coverage, if you will. But, we also have use cases where being mobile or tactical on the go is very important. So we have a tactical version that's used, by, for example, special forces when they're on the go and they have to constantly deploy, redeploy, disassemble, assemble, and move it. We have mobile versions that go on vehicles, either military vehicles or civilian covert vehicles that provide kind of a moving bubble of protection, for example, for VIPs that are being protected. We have I would call it a long-range directional version where you're not protecting a dome, but you're protecting a corridor, a long-range direction. So, for example, airport runways or a border. And then most recently, we came out with a few months ago, and we're experiencing incredibly strong demand for it. It's been a great launch and rollout, is we actually have a backpack version where, security professionals can get to hard-to-reach areas with the system on their back. And of course, that meets all kind of size and compliance requirements. So those are kind of the configurations, if you will. And yes, it's hardware that consists of a software-defined radio and antennas and all the other peripheral hardware to support it. But very importantly, to your question, the core and heart of the capability is the software. And the software and this technology needs constant updates. So we're constantly issuing to our clients new software to counter the latest threats that come out. Some people have even given it, analogies to the computer virus and antivirus world where, you have new threats. And so you have to come up with updates to counter that threat. So the core value, of course, is in the maintenance and constantly updating the software to counter the latest threats as well as deliver new capabilities and functionality.
Jeffrey, can you give us an overview of the regulatory environment today?
There are some sort of existing constraints in the usage, but the good news is there's a lot of activity right now in Congress and on Capitol Hill to extend some of these authorities and allowances. So as an example, and Europe is a bit more, or certain European countries and Asian countries are a bit ahead of the US in terms of having this technology allowed to be used by a wider set of security actors. But for example, in the US, this type of technology on the mitigation side is currently limited to the federal level. So certain agencies within the DoD and military, of course, and within DHS and DOJ and DOE on the energy side, it's limited to those kind of federal agencies. But the good news is it's clear that this threat is becoming widespread, and the federal agencies can't be everywhere all the time. And there's a huge amount of resources, human resources and talent at the state and local level. And so they really have to be empowered as well. So there's a White House National Action Plan, and there's been some bills in Congress. They've been introduced and reintroduced and revised the last few sessions. Hopefully we're getting closer, which would empower what people call SLTT, state, local, territorial, and tribal, and also critical infrastructure levels to be able to get these detection and mitigation authorities. In some cases, it's actually extending some detection capabilities or allowing for pilot programs, allowing for better cooperation or allowing for example, pre-deployed equipment at critical infrastructure sites and some other measures as well to start better tracking these kind of incidents in databases. So that has been a bit of a challenge to get more authority and allowances into state and local law enforcement. For the federal level, there are these authorizations. They, of course, have to go through a reauthorization period, and Congress has been good about extending those. But there seems to be a lot of goodwill, and we just hope it gets over the goal line to now extend these authorities to state and local. I can tell you in other countries, the police with certain permissions or the equivalent of a warrant or some kind of permission, or if they see an imminent threat, they are allowed to use counter-drone mitigation technologies. So they're a bit more empowered in some of these cases. So we've seen enormous growth just being used in the U.S. at the federal level, but we're looking forward to when state and local is empowered, because then the growth will be exponential. When you think of high school football games, college football games, all kinds of parades, holiday celebrations, things like that need to be protected, that don't always necessarily have the federal coverage, then you need this kind of state and local empowerment.
What type of events qualify for federal coverage today?
When you're talking about major events like, sports championships or even gatherings of world leaders and things like that, wherever there's a critical mass in terms of there's an actual threshold number, forget how many tens of thousands. At that point, it becomes a federally protected event where you have the involvement of federal agencies. And that's just on the event side. And then, of course, though, there's lots of other use cases, protecting critical infrastructure, protecting borders, protecting prisons, protecting, landmarks. So there's all kinds of use cases where really at the end of the day, as the drones proliferate, we're going to want to see state and local have that authority as well.
From your perspective, how important is a multi-layer approach to drone defense? And how do you facilitate this in practice?
Your question really cuts across a few different issues, which are all relevant. And in terms of how different actors can work together, that's something that the government agencies work out in terms of their own rules of engagement and procedures and things like that. And you'll often see cooperation between multiple bodies or multiple organizations, agencies, levels of government. But you raised another point about multi-layered approach, and that's really important. And in terms of integration, the issue is technology integration. And even though we were developed to complement and make up for the shortcomings of other technologies, we're not saying those other technologies don't have a role. In fact, we think they do have a role. There's a lot of good detection technologies and mitigation technologies that are tried and true. And what seems to be emerging as a consensus is a multi-layer integrated approach where you can use multiple technologies. So, for example, and I would call it kind of an escalating approach. So what some have advocated, and this seems to be the school of thought going forward, is that you can have a kind of escalating approach. So, for example, at a major event, you may, as a first resort, because you want to enable continuity, you want to make prevent an incident from becoming an incident or making an incident into a non-incident and allowing the game and the communications or the event to continue. We would advocate for an RF cyber-centric approach where the first option would be quietly detecting and then mitigating the drone threat by, landing it quietly, softly in a safe area, in a way that there's no panic, there's no disruption and continues. But we're all in favor of having, multiple approaches. So maybe a second resort could be jamming if for some reason, it was a different kind of drone threat. And then, only as a very last resort, if cyber didn't work and if jamming didn't work, then you could maybe revert to a kinetic, physical sort of solution. But we're all in favor of a multi-layered approach. We work, for example, with all the prime defense contractors and integrators, and often you'll have multiple detection methods alongside our RF cyber detection method. You may have radar or acoustic or other RF directional finders or thermal cameras. And then on the mitigation side, also have the option of jamming or kinetic. So, there's definitely room for a multi-layered approach, and you need it. You want all those options in the toolkit.
And of course, all of the solutions have to match up to the regulations within each country, right?
Absolutely, exactly. And that's why, you have to conform to the regulations and conform to the sector, to the vertical, the application. I mean, every environment is different. What you can do in a rural area in a, military conflict is very different from what you can do, in a crowded stadium or what you can do in an airport. So that's why, we're very focused on these sensitive environments where you really want to be surgical. But you're right. It's very, very specific to a country's regulations and as well as the sector, the environment, the use case, the deployment. There's not one size fits all. It's definitely very customized by use case and industry, if you will.
With the rapid evolution of drone technology, how does D-Fend Solutions stay ahead of the curve in developing countermeasures?
And that's sort of the core expertise. That's who we are and what we do. That's our identity. And that's why our customers come to us. So we have a very advanced R&D team. That's all they're doing all day long is studying not just the current drone threat, but trying to stay a drone threat ahead, as we say, what's emerging, what's coming next. So, for example, a lot of emerging drone technologies are arising that are claiming or that seem to be immune to things like spoofing and jamming, or can evade even kinetic means. So that's why we're constantly focused on the most intelligent, smart, kind of cyber-centric methods that will still be able to counter the drones, and really always focused on what is coming in the next generation of drone technology to really get inside the heart of it and come up with the countermeasures to outsmart it, if you will, very quickly, because certainly the bad actors are, depending on what's out there, they're always looking for new technologies to outsmart the authorities. And so we're there to always figure out what's happening in the next generation and empowering our users to be able to counter that. But again, and I'm always emphasizing this, one of the capabilities we're most proud of is the ability to distinguish between the friendly, authorized, beneficial, positive drones and the negative, hostile actors, if you will. So that has to be a key part of it as well, that whatever countermeasure is adopted is only focused on the bad actor or the bad drone and allows the positive drones to continue to do their job, especially since many of our users are also drone users. Obviously, you have drones doing great things for law enforcement, for airports, all kinds of inspections and security applications and things like that. And we want those drones to continue to flourish.
How can you tell when a drone is flying with malicious intent or just clueless?
Well, that's a good point, and it's really on multiple levels. I mean, at the core, we're really distinguishing between positive, friendly, authorized drones and unauthorized drones. Most of our users don't necessarily need right away to distinguish between a careless actor or an actor with bad intent, because a drone that's threatening a collision or invading privacy, it doesn't really matter what the intent is. I mean, it does matter when you maybe apprehend the suspect or who's illegally or unauthorized using the drone. And by the way, that's why our system also indicates the takeoff pilot location, not just the drone location. So the first level, the most urgent thing is to distinguish whether the drone, is friendly and authorized or unauthorized and hostile or rogue. What you're asking about, I think, is another level down, which is on the unauthorized drone, whether it's careless or whether it's malicious. The security professionals can see by patterns, by repeat behavior, and by other indicators. And there are some data points that could probably help them distinguish between that, in terms of their own intelligence as professionals. So that's more at the operating or analytical level. And then, of course, it depends on the sector and the use case. I mean, obviously, if a group of, soldiers or law enforcement are, finding themselves under attack by malicious commercial drones, then by definition, it's a hostile intent. Whereas, at an event or a stadium or a civilian location, it might be harder to distinguish, but there are definitely, operating methods, tradecraft, if you will, that the professionals can kind of figure that out.
How do you see the balance between drone innovation and security evolving? And what role does D-Fend Solution play in this landscape?
I mean, it's actually exciting to see the skies get increasingly crowded with very positive and beneficial to society applications across so many different areas, whether it be, health or shipping or commerce, construction, environmental protection, agriculture, you name it. So the application technology is growing. The capabilities of the drones are growing in terms of their distances they can fly, the smaller form factor, the greater capabilities they have in terms of, their functionality, their vision, things like that. So that's growing, and that's all positive, and that's all the more reason why those positive elements have to be very precisely and surgically, really high degree of precision and nuance, distinguished from the malicious and the bad actor or the careless. So, again, that's what we thrive on. We thrive on following the drone industry and then keeping up with it and allowing and protecting it by, making sure that each next generation drone, if it were to be maliciously used, that it can somehow be countered. As I mentioned earlier, some of the technology is evolving in a way that traditional countermeasures, like jamming and spoofing and even kinetic, may be less effective. And that's why we're, really focused on giving our users the ability to counter at the core level of safety and control, the ability to overcome that.
What's next for D-Fend Solutions?
The past year, we came out with EnforceAir 2, which gave much more power and performance and range and capabilities in a much smaller footprint, which was really exciting. The product got smaller, but the power and range and capabilities got bigger. As I said, now you can put it on a backpack even. So that's exciting, and the product will continue on the hardware level to continue to be enhanced. On the software level, we're constantly coming out with new functionality, new capabilities in terms of being able to get more control over the rogue drone situation. And above all, countering, as we discussed earlier, countering the drone threats, more tracking and mitigation capabilities as new drones come to market. We're also coming out with the ability to cover even vaster distances. So, being able to, for example, chain together many of our units to cover huge, vast areas. Right now, we have something called MSC2, which is our own command and control system, which allows you to cover a bigger area with one server and one view. But we're going to kind of take that even to the next level of being able to really cover gigantic areas by chaining together, if you will, the detection capabilities of multiple units of our system.
Is there anything that we missed that we should talk about?
Again, it's really great. I love your radio show because I love talking drone and counter drone, and your programs are great, and your listeners are really passionate. So I'm happy to have a dialogue about counter drone technology with any interested listeners. They can go to our website at dfendsolutions.com. I encourage also everyone to look at the tracker that's on the website, the drone incident and attack tracker, if you want to know the latest and greatest incidents that are happening. And then, we offer a wide range of interesting content and white papers and videos where you actually can see the system in place, underway as kind of a demonstration. And, any questions, welcome to submit them at our website or send me an email at info@dfendsolutions.com.
And for my final question, Jeffrey, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
We want to enable this drone-powered society. We want to overcome the rogue drone threats. And we think those are actually compatible and complementary. And so we want all the drone users and makers out there that are, part of your community to flourish by protecting them in a very surgical way that enables continuity.
That's it for episode 418 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Jeffery Starr of D-Fend Solutions. I want to thank Jeffery for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about D-Fend Solutions or want to connect with Jeffery, check out the webpage at d-fendsolutions.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, then please subscribe and share. Write a glowing review on iTunes. And if you're able, donate to keep the podcast going. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.